Hey there, how's it going? My name is David, you're watching KCRC. Welcome back to another RC vlog coming to you from the park. Excuse the noise, it's still late summer here, so plenty of insects. That's why I usually do a voiceover at home, because the audio in the park is just not great. I'm out here running my VQS, so I don't think I've featured this on the channel. I've done a couple of running videos, but not really featured it, so some people might be interested, so let's have a look. So as you can probably tell, trying to record a video at the park in late summer is a bad idea. The audio was there was too much background noise. So once again, I'll just do a voiceover from home. It's a lot easier and you can hear me a lot clearer. So this is the Tamiya VQS, which is a re-release of the original Tamiya Vanquish from back in I want to say 1988, around that time. The VQS came out as a re-release in 2020. Now I don't know why they decided to change the name. Must have been an issue with usage or something like that. Essentially though, this is an exact copy of the original Vanquish from back in the day. I don't believe there's certainly no significant differences between the re-release and the original. Now the VQS Vanquish is often seen and often called the poor man's Avanti, simply because it kind of shares a lot of parts with the Avanti, but it was much cheaper as it was mostly made of plastic. I feel to call the Vanquish a poor man's Avanti does it a bit of an injustice. I think this is a superb buggy in its own right, and if you were to get your hands on one of these, certainly back in the day, if I was lucky enough to afford one of these, I wouldn't be calling it poor man's Avanti. And even today, I think the VQS is a great alternative to the much more expensive Avanti or Egress, and certainly it's no less of an enjoyable buggy to build and run. So a brief overview of the VQS. The reason it's often called the poor man's Avanti is simply because it shares a lot of the drivetrain and suspension components from the Avanti, although a lot of them are plastic rather than metal, aluminium, etc. Essentially the front and rear gearboxes are identical. But what you get with the VQS, I mean the VQS is considerably cheaper than the Avanti or the Egress. In Japan you're looking at about 30,000 yen for a VQS, which when you compare to a Terra Scorcher, which is around 20,000 yen, is quite expensive. But then things like the Avanti, the most recent Avanti Black Special, that's nearer to 60,000 yen. Egress is almost the same as well, so it's considerably cheaper than either the Avanti or the Egress. For the 30,000 yen you get a lot of standard equipment. Although there are lots of plastic parts used in the build, there's still a fair share of metal and aluminium parts. You get a front and rear diffs. Now the diffs are the old style planetary gears diffs, no bevel gear diffs or ball diffs. You get a center differential, which is a ball diff. You get fully adjustable suspension, turnbuckles all around, stabilizer bars front and rear, universal shafts and full bearing specification. Now my VQS has a few slight mods on them. Most notably I replaced the kit yellow CVA dampers with high caps, and the reason I replaced it simply because the front CVA damper broke on the shakedown run. The design is not a great one, so when you're building up the shocks and you thread on the rod end onto the suspension shaft, there's not a lot of thread that it can bite into, so it's quite loose, and I must have jumped or landed wrong and it basically popped off. Now I was able to recover the spring, but the VQS shocks are quite an unusual design. They taper down, they become narrower towards the bottom, so the lower spring perch is actually much smaller than on most other Tamiyas. Unfortunately that got ejected somewhere, I couldn't find it. Now because it's narrower, it's not something you can just borrow from another kit. I needed to order exact replacement parts for the VQS, and I figured it's probably going to it's highly likely would happen again, so I ended up buying the high caps, which are a fantastic upgrade. I mean they're much better than the stock suspension and they look a lot nicer too. Aside from that, the only mods I've done is I replaced the screws with a hex screw set, just for convenience really, more than anything else. Now the only other mod I've done is when you build the VQS, one of the first things you're going to notice is the body does not sit well onto the chassis. When it's clipped in, it wants to wobble left and right, and it does so to annoying levels, and So what I ended up doing is just attaching a few pieces of foam on the inside of the body to kind of have it brace against the side of the chassis. It's not an ideal solution, but there's not really many places you could like attach Velcro, hold the body in place. My solution is simple and it kind of works. It still wobbles a little bit, but not noticeably so. Now I do have a couple of mods lined up for this, so I've managed to finally get hold of a Vanquish driver figure cockpit, and eventually I plan to install it. I've seen some other people do it on the net. It's not straightforward though, as the VQS body isn't really designed, the chassis isn't really designed to mount an Vanquish driver, and you have the issue that the steering servo arm is in the way, so you have to kind of basically rig up some platform to mount the driver figure above that. But eventually I'll get around to it, because I think that's one of the only things I don't really like about the VQS Vanquish's looks. The cockpit is quite long and you can see right into the chassis, and the driver figure that you get with the kit just doesn't really do it justice. So eventually I plan to get around to installing the Vanquish driver figure. Now, one thing that really does strike me every time I run this buggy, and I think this is probably the first time this year I've actually run the VQS, and straight away, as soon as you start driving it, it's like you notice just how quiet it is. I don't know if it's, my egress is similarly so, but the chassis, the gearbox, the drivetrain is very, very quiet, especially compared to other Tamiyas from that era, and even Kyosho's as well. It's very, very free moving, but very quiet drivetrain. In fact, the best way I can think to describe it is, if any of you guys used to watch, not Airwolf, Blue Thunder, and you probably remember Blue Thunder had like the whisper mode, quieten it down. The VQS runs like that compared to other Tamiyas. I ran this back to back with my Terra Scorcher, and the difference in volume is just unbelievable. This is just so, the VQS is just so much quieter. Maybe it's the gearbox design, the chassis design, I don't know, but yeah, it's a very quiet buggy. Now, I really do like the way the buggy handles as well. It's very well balanced. The front shocks don't have a lot of travel to them, but they do work really well. I mean, I can't comment too much on the kit shocks because I didn't even finish one battery pack before I swapped them out for the high caps. But yeah, the VQS with high cap dampers and everything else set to factory handles really well. I do really like the way the buggy looks though. It's got this very long, sleek design, and it's actually I think it's probably one of the longest buggies I own, just simply because the front and rear bumpers are so extended from the chassis. Now, with the kit tires on and the kind of surface I run, you get really good traction. This thing pulls really well off the line, handles really well, and very little in the way of traction rolls, which is quite surprising given its high ride height. With the standard dampers, this thing is like it's on stilts. Even with the high caps, it still rides pretty high, which kind of helps it on grass because it's got less resistance, but it can cause traction rolls, but I've not really suffered too much from the issue. So VQS downsides, weak points, there isn't really any major flaw. It's pretty well built buggy. The most notable weakness is at the back of the car, the plate G, I want to say it's G11, one of the G parts, forms part of the rear damper stay and mounts on top of the gearbox. That is notorious for breaking. The part itself is under quite a lot of stress from different directions, and it tends to break easily. Now, Tamiya don't do any upgrades, but third-party manufacturers have started to release, I believe they're carbon, possibly aluminium upgrades. If I remember correctly, Mick over at RC Hobby Shed, he fitted them to his VQS, so if you're interested, go over and check his channel out. Me personally, I just bought a couple of spare G parts trees, so I've got a few on hand should I break them. But having just said that, I drove the buggy a whole lot last year, and aside from the shakedown run where the front shock decided it no longer wanted to be attached to the buggy, it's pretty robust. Well, by vintage Tamiya standards at least. I mean, it won't stand up to modern day track use or bashing, but it's pretty robust. So those are my thoughts on the Tamiya VQS/Vanquish. A superb, often overlooked buggy, and a great addition to any RC collection. Well, I'm going to cut back to David in the park. well, there we go. That's a quick look at the Tamiya VQS. Thank you for joining me today. I'll get the run video edited as soon as possible. It probably work out the run video comes out before this video. So I've got a lot of other projects in the works. One that's going to be a major departure for me personally, in the bounds of the RC hobby. Something I've not done before, but I'm kind of excited to kind of dip my toes into something completely new. I'm not sure it'll be of interest to the people that tend to watch my channel, but we'll see. I might do a video on it, and if it looks like people are interested, I may do some more videos, but we'll see what happens. Well, anyway, my name is David. You've been watching KCRC. Happy RCing, everybody. I'll catch you in the next one.